Hi, I'm Brandy. This is Hound Dog Hollow, and as you can see, my husband has broken my tripod for my camera, so we have like a little makeshift setup here so I can share this book with you, Healing Ancestral Karma. This is another, obviously, ancestral veneration book, ancestral work book, very good, Dr. Stephen Farmer. I very much enjoyed it. I'm just gonna flip you through it. So, very simple, very easy to start. Starts at 101 and then just works through basically this person's journey, but also, you know, adding more and more information as you are more able to understand. Those are my ducks. So getting acquainted with the ancestors and, you know, ancestral veneration, cultural views and practices, the holy evenings of the dead, 3 types of ancestors, which we at this point we've talked about ad nauseum. So basically, your ancestors of blood, your ancestors of place, and your ancestors of affinity, or like your job. So like every shaman that ever came before you, or every nurse that came before me. So like Florence Nightingale would be an ancestor of my affinity, right? Ancestor of place would be all the people whose bones are buried in the land that I steward now in Hound Dog Hollow, and of course your bloodlines. But not just your bloodlines. If you're adopted, those are your ancestors as well. It's by blood or adoption. It would be your ancestors. Earthbound spirits talks about making contact with the ancestors, and then and I'll flip through all of this. And then the last part is healing ancestral family patterns. And he goes on at length about that. So if you hear scuttling, it's because my tortoise decided to wake up and he's right under my feet. There's an intro. And just like the other books, I'm just going to show you everything. This is really... The first part is about getting acquainted with your ancestors. This is basic 101. This is how to get into it. It talks about ancestral veneration. It talks about ancestral... And it has little exercises for you to try to strengthen your skills as you go through each thing. So reviewing your ancestral connections, right? And that means like, have you ever honored deceased loved ones? Who do you feel the most connected to? Things like that. Then he goes into cultural views and practices. Chinese, African... I would venture to say more than Chinese. I have a lot of countries in Asia still have ancestor altars. Hawaiian traditions, holy evenings of the dead, so different dead celebrations. You're familiar with some more than others. So, of course, Dia de Muertos, Samhain. And then it asks you every time there's an exercise. So this one's holidays to or honor the ancestors. Do you have followings of fond memories of Halloween? My God, I can't speak. 3 types of ancestors we've already talked about. I've already kind of briefly. So your biological ancestors, and then the exercise would be reviewing your family lineage. Territorial ancestors, and the exercise is blessing your land. Spiritual ancestors, and the exercise is discovering your spiritual ancestors. And this is pretty standard across almost every book so far that I've read on ancestral veneration, which doesn't make it any less helpful. It's just, pardon me, it's just that, and I like to read the different spins on the same information. You know, I like that about 101 books. So let's see here. 10 reasons spirit remain earthbound. This was a really interesting one. I journaled about this. And it's just like they're unaware of their own death, unfinished business, to protect loved ones, so on and so forth. Making contact with the ancestors is the whole second chapter. So a lot of people are like, how do I start? What do I do? Where do I begin? And he talks first about how you can perceive messages. You can perceive them visually. You can perceive them auditorily. You can perceive them cognitively. And then doing an exercise to discover your perceptual preferences. Like, how do you typically gather information? So for me, I don't hear my ancestors hardly ever. I can't remember hearing them in my dreams. Usually is where they come to me. Or I saw my grandfather at the kitchen table. I just see him. I just see him like he's here with me. So for me, it's more visual, but I also have a lot of cognitive. I sense them, and they come to me in dreams. Blocks to perceiving or receiving. So you might be blocked by grief. You might be blocked by pain, self-pity, aggression. And it works through those. Near-death experiences and the ancestors kind of touches on that. So, in different testimonies, he does pull in a lot of science studies that support his his points. My favorite thing that I have been taught numerous times, like completely not spiritually, but as a nurse, is epigenetics is a big deal. And epigenetics is, in my opinion, literally the proof that your ancestors literally always affect you, because it talks about the changes in our DNA that are passed down genetically. So, for example, anything bad or good, or the conditions basically that my grandmother suffered, are part of my DNA, because my mother was, you're born with every egg that you'll ever have. So my mother was in my grandmother stomach, right, or her uterus, when she was growing. And my mother, who was born with every egg she would ever have, so me inside of my mother, inside of my grandmother, so all three of us were affected, and so on and so forth. So at least 3 generations with every pregnancy. And so if you are a refugee of war, if you are very poor and have a very bad diet, if you have extreme amounts of stress, all of those things can affect the fetus and the progeny. And we're talking about trauma, we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about pollution, we're talking about radiation. So it is a really interesting study, but I digress. Communication with the ancestors. So direct experience. Now I see you. It's a story of him. Land of the ancestors, which is like a place he went in a shamanic journey. And so basically the exercise is an ancestor calling song. Mediumship, like when you should seek a medium. He himself is a medium. Energy, DNA, and ancestors. He goes into some like quantum and theoretical physics here. It's kind of a complex thing, so I can't really explain it, but it's energy in the unified field, the mysteries of DNA, quantum mechanics, biocentrism, and consciousness. That's another big one. Like, he doesn't say it in language that is difficult to understand. They're just very abstract concepts. Visiting your parents' grave. I can't do that, but I'm going to try. So visiting the grave is an exercise. Automatic writing is an exercise. A lot of people do that as well. It's a very good psychological exercise. Divination with the ancestors. Divination tools. So tarot cards, oracle cards, runes, ancestral stones, I Ching. And exercise. Try to receive a message from your ancestors through divination. A lot of people feel like the best place to start with that is a simple yes or no. So a flip of a coin, a pendulum, something very simple. Animal spirit guides as messengers. And it just talks about connecting with an animal spirit. It has an intense story. Ancestor sitting and ancestor walking. So it's basically meditation. So an ancestor sitting meditation, sitting with your ancestor, or sitting as your ancestor sat. So sitting in a forest and channeling the feelings of your ancestor doing the same thing. And ancestor walking meditation, that's another similar thing. Ancestors, past lives, and reincarnation. And it kind of talks, and this was a very interesting chapter for me, because I do believe that I am an immortal spirit, in a human experience right now. And he talks about how ancestral veneration and that belief are not mutually exclusive, and how they work together. So it was very interesting, really good stories to illustrate it. I liked it a lot. And that's the end of chapter 2. So then the third part is what the book is all about, because he has to prime you to get ready for that, which is healing ancestral family patterns. So creating a family altar and a family tree is his first step. And so family altar, building your family tree, connecting with your family. And he has like a little sample, like this should be on your altar. You should work with these first if that's what your aim is. Some people find that when they're first starting, the most powerful well ancestors are far back beyond name. And that's what ancestral medicine preaches. But this one's a little bit different because you're specifically trying to heal your ancestor line. So it talks about trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's just like you can have intrusive memories, avoidance, negative changes in thinking of mood, hyperarousal. It talks about getting treatment. And the exercise is like tree therapy. It talks about like family secrets and the different types and how they can affect your lineage. So we have, big, massive secrets. We have, four degrees, basically. First degree is the most toxic. They're deadly. They involve victimization. So murder, assault, torture, sexual crimes. Second degree are the demoralizing and potentially dangerous. So like substance abuse, addictions, things like that. The third ones are toxicity that can be damaging because they violate freedom or boundaries. So family secrets that create distrust. Marital secrets like closeted gay or lesbians, infidelities, hidden resentments, stuff like that. And the fourth is just toxic shame. So guilt, fear, anxiety, depression, cultural shame, stuff like that. And it talks to you about getting through it. The dark law was a really interesting thing. And it's basically, dark law is the shadow side of your ego, the part of you that limits your potential by subconsciously reenacting deep-seated insecurities. And so he talks about acknowledging that. So here's some example. No one will ever love me because I'm just bad. People can never be trusted. Those are curses that you're putting on yourself by having that thought frame, because your thought manifests your reality. And if you think those negative things, even just in the back of your mind, they are more likely to manifest. So it talks about uncovering your dark law and has a whole exercise on how you can do that, and then deconstructing it and challenging it, which is really useful in a whole bunch of levels. So changing your genes, this is the one about epigenetics. And then, so he's saying, obviously, basically, when you heal yourself, you heal your line. And that's scientifically proven, at least going forward. If you heal yourself, if you eat nutritious food, if you have a stable environment and security and provide a stable home for your progeny, if you do those things, you literally change the DNA of your descendants. So this is something I talk about with my cousin. It's just like the buck stops here. There will be, I have made this my mission in life. I will not keep perpetuating this stuff. I will work my hardest to make sure that certain ancestral courses that have been in our family stop. And she's committed to the same. And my sisters too. So it's really, really helpful. And I mean, and that's what a lot of what my spiritual journey is about. Is just like, how can I live, and how can I be, and how can I pass on those truths to my kids, to my future. So the first step is healing yourself. And then he talks about how you can do that. Hypnotherapy. somatic experiencing, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, emotional freedom technique, breath work. Breath work is no joke. Yoga, Tai Chi, family constellations. And so if you have an addiction, he talks about 12-step programs. And it's just, then we get into shamanism and shamanic healing and how you can do those. There's first how things can affect you in a way that you probably need a shaman. So like soul loss, psychic intrusions, loss of power. You don't literally lose your soul, but when you have a soul wound, that can be really, so like I've spoken about this because this year was particularly challenging for us, and I did suffer a soul wound, and my husband too, although he's not as verbal about it, with the catastrophe that happened in our town and the response to it, and just thinking about it was painful. But when things challenge your belief in society and in humans and the way that things are, in that way, it really is painful. So I digress. If that's what it means by soul loss, not that you literally sold your soul or something, or you lost your soul, but that you've lost a part of it. It's been damaged, it's been hurt. So guidelines for healing ancestral karma. So it talks about when you should seek professional help, when it's safe for you to try and begin yourself. So, and then he talks about what it looks like. Energy healing for an ancestor. And there has exercises. Forgiving yourself is a major thing. And even if you were the victim, they're like, what do I have to forgive myself for? Shame. Sometimes we take responsibility for things that were completely out of our control. Sometimes I find that people who have been abused don't just hate their abuser, they also hate themselves a little bit. That's just my personal opinion. But it's talking about you don't have to do that, let that go. And then it talks about forgiving another if you so choose. You do not have to, but it goes through an exercise of how you might do that. A couple exercises. Then we talk about intergenerational healing ancestors across generation. And it's just, it goes through really like a long process, and such as spontaneous ancestral healing. It's a pretty long process, but basically a lot of it is just putting healing energy specifically into your ancestral line, and the universe uses it, and they use it however they're going to use it. Changing the story is challenging those preconceptions that you had about your family or your lineage growing up. So it's a personal story, but it's important. And then stepping back into the ancestors is an exercise to connect with them. And then this is his his experience through shamanic journeying, meeting an ancient ancestor. So a 25,000-year-old ancestral spirit. And this is open to anyone because I feel like you don't have the shamanic journey, or you can, or if you get to this point, then they will contact you, obviously, when you're ready. But most of us are not ready. But that doesn't mean that they're not there. They meet that spirit again. And then this is just about death. How his ancestral work kind of worked with him processing a couple deaths. And death and our soul's evolution, and a shamanic journey that he did, talking about the soul's evolution after death. And that's how the book ends. Very good book. Interesting perspective. I got a lot out of it. I got a lot of information. I got a lot of exercises. I very much enjoyed it. And so I do recommend it to you. So, as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Definitely check out Healing Ancestral Karma by Dr. Stephen Farmer. And I have a couple more books in my ancestral medicine, ancestral healing series. And then we'll be moving on. Love you guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.